I've got a new cake for you. It's a bubble tea cake. And this week, I thought it would be fun to answer another one of your questions while I work on it. What's the question? I'll tell you in a minute. But first, my name is Natalie Sideserf, and I make cakes that don't look like cakes. And today I'm gonna show you how I made a bubble tea cake. I try my best to make at least one new cake every week for you guys. And then I post a video every Monday showing said new cake. Well, last week, I didn't make a new cake. And that's because I was out of town working on a big time project that I can't tell you about. Not yet, at least. I'll definitely tell you all about it once the project is out in the world. It's pretty cool. But for now, all I can say is I was asked to make a cake. No one ever reaches out,
"Hey Natalie, cool cakes. Do you think you can crochet me a blanket?"
Nope, they always want cakes. And that's good news for everyone, because I don't know how to crochet. But I do know how to make cakes of pretty much everything. So I've been getting a lot of questions from you all lately, and I love it. I am happy to answer any of these questions that you guys have, so keep them coming. Today, I figured I'd answer a question while you watch me make this bubble tea cake. What is the first cake that you ever made? So I studied art in college at Ohio State University, so I had all kinds of sculpting knowledge prior to sculpting cakes. It's just that I used traditional art media, not cake yet. So shortly after graduating, my best friend Kelsey, who watched a lot of cake TV shows at the time, she said, "You know how to sculpt, Natalie. If I buy all the stuff, will you attempt to make a sculpted cake of a cow skull for a friend Rudy's birthday?" And I said, yes, of course. It sounds like a lot of fun. Now, I had never seen a cake TV show, nor had I ever made a cake in my entire life, so I had no idea what I was getting into. But I figured I'd just trust my sculpting intuition and use the knowledge that I had from sculpting with traditional art materials, like clay, and I would try my best to use these new edible materials that I am extremely unfamiliar with. So the two of us baked a layer of chocolate boxed cake mix together, and I carved it as close to the shape of a cow skull as I could. It honestly wasn't too bad given my lack of experience. But sculpting cake is tricky because, it's like soft and squishy. Then I covered the cake in a layer of fondant and I shaped it, and then it was time to add the horns. And I had no clue how I could possibly add horns. I didn't even know that fondant dries hard when you leave it out overnight. So I'm like looking at this fondant thinking that it's just like too squishy to make horns. They were like limp and falling over. I tried, it was a disaster. So I was thinking, how in the world can I make horns for this cow skull cake? So we searched around the house, and I'm thinking, what can we use to make horns? And that's when I found tape. So I took tape and I wrapped it up into like two cone-like shapes, and then I shoved those tape cones into the sides of the cake where the horns would be. And that was it. That's how I made horns for that cake. It's like clueless DIY. But you know what? It worked. It was pretty acceptable. No, you couldn't eat the horns. But to be fair, people put plastic cake toppers on cakes all the time, and you can't eat those. Okay, so I have a picture of this cake. I'm gonna show it to you. It's blurry, it's terrible, but after telling you all about it, I've gotta show you the cake. My very first cake. Are you ready? Okay, here it is. Look at that. My very first cake ever. I think it's kind of cute. Got that brown sugar sand. So it turns out that my friend Rudy, who we made the cake for, he loved it, which is the whole point. Cakes don't have to be perfect. I think that as long as the people around you enjoy the cake you made, then it's a success. Cakes are about celebrating things like weddings and graduations and Rudy's birthday. So overall, my first cake was a success. That cake was also the reason that I decided to make sculpted cakes for a living. So that's a big time success. It changed my whole life. I always made realistic art, and after making this cake, I thought, I bet that I could make realistic cake art with these materials. I just needed to learn how the materials work so that I can really see what I can do with them. How far can I stretch them? How realistic can I make these materials look? And that's what I did. I learned about all these different edible materials that I could use on a cake, like fondant and modeling chocolate and gum paste and gelatin and wafer paper. I remember at the time I was so excited to dive in and learn and try my best to make these like hyper-realistic cakes. And honestly, I am still just as passionate about it as I was back then. I love it. I love cakes. I love making cakes. And you wanna know what's really cool? That was the first, but not the last cow skull cake that I've ever made. Because many years later, like 8 years I think, I got to remake a cow skull cake. So I was asked to to make a 50th anniversary cake for a couple who owned a dance hall in Austin called the Broken Spoke. They wanted something country themed, so I designed a realistic cow skull cake that literally hung on the wall. My goal was to make it so realistic that people would think that it was a real cow skull that's just hung up as decoration. And guess what? It worked. The guests and the couple had no clue that it was a cake until it was time to cut it.
That's a cake?
Bruh.
And their reactions were absolutely amazing. It was really neat to revisit making a cow skull after so many years of cake making. And I have to admit, I've come a long way from my very first tape-horned cow skull cake. And nowadays, I know even more about cake. And I owe it all to practice and experimenting. I see every single cake that I make as an opportunity to learn something new about cakes. You'd think after all these years I'd run out of things to learn, but that is absolutely not the case at all. Like, I am always learning, even now, still, so many years later. And there you have it, a bubble tea cake. One of the bonuses of making this cake is I get to drink the real teas and then eat the cake. Tea and cake, it's a great combo. Plus, I love those little squishy pearls. All right, let's cut it. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe now because I post a new cake every week. I'll see you next week for another cake.